Aaron Keller released a blog post about 5v5 and 6v6. If you want to know my opinion, I did two videos a while ago on 5v5 6v6. More or less, everyone's saying what I said years ago. And I will just say this preemptively: 6v6 tanks are actually not solvable, and 5v5 tanks are solvable. Now, whether that's enjoyable or not in the solving of those roles is a different discussion. But yeah, you can come on my stream if you're upset that I said that and you need proof. But I'm not going to talk about it right now because we got a bunch of shit to read. All right, hey everyone. There's been a lot of talk about 6v6 lately, and it's only intensified in recent weeks since we posted our last director's take and made a Twitter post with a promise to talk about it in the future. Now is the future, and this is the next piece. So let's get into it. This is a pretty complex and nuanced topic, and it's not that nuanced, to be completely fair. There's stuff to it, it's just not that nuanced. Like, doctors got a tougher job. Nuclear physicists have a tougher job. Pretty complex and nuanced topic, as it gets to the beating heart of what makes this game tick. And we can talk about the tanks, it's interesting. Marvel Rivals kind of shows what happens when you don't have a permanent tank, and it just feels deathmatchy. Our players have different opinions and preferences about the ideal number of players in an Overwatch match, and so does our team. We're a microcosm of the broader community and discuss this internally, except the Junkrat community. Fucking no part of that, because no one's vouching for that guy right now. I'm hoping this piece will serve as an introduction to our own discussions and a jumping off point to engage with all of you. I'd like to set a few expectations and ground rules. First, it's pretty long, it's not that bad. You want a TLR? Yeah, cool. Secondly, I'm not here to tell you what you ought to like or even what's empirically better. This is a game, and your preference for fun is relative to your own tastes, ability, and experience. Lastly, there are years of decisions that affect such a fundamental piece of Overwatch. Some of you might be intermittently aware of these, while others may not be. Before diving in, I'd like to set the stage and give some context of the larger changes in the game. Cool. Historical context. There's been 3 large format changes to Overwatch. The first happened shortly after the game launch, and there was hero limits before you could any number of heroes on a team. You could have 6 Genjis, 6 Reinhardts, if memory serves right. The winner of Team 4's internal tournament was 1 Winston and 5 Zenyatas. The pro meta when Overwatch first came out was 3 Winstons, 3 Lucios. Zenyatta's orb stacked. This is when Zenyatta had 150 health, could be one shot by Widow, who did 150 a pop. Stacked with no cap at healing at the time, it was glorious and terrifying. During early development, it was necessary to have duplicate heroes per team because they only had 4 heroes. As the roster grew, this was no longer necessary and induced issues. Overwatch heroes have very distinct kits with impactful abilities. Stacking these could be fun, but it posed a balancing challenge. People reference double barrier, but back then you could have 6. Imagine 6 immortality fields. The number of team composition strategies available was huge. The variety was great, but it didn't feel like we could ever truly balance the game without severely watering down our heroes. See tanks in 6v6. So we made the choices to impose a limit of 1 per team. This solved the issue of ability stacking, but it had a few side effects. It traded some of the creativity in putting together team compositions for a more consistent and balanced experience. It also took away some choice from players. If someone wanted to play Tracer, and you were already Tracer, then they would have to be unable to. The theme of this and future decisions was limiting match variety as well as player freedom and creativity in order to create a more balanced, consistent, and competitive experience for players. This is what I've been telling people about 222 for 5 or 6 years now. It wasn't balanced, it was a consistent experience. Remember this point because we'll touch on it a few more times in this piece. I think that the hero limit rule was a great decision, and we would make it again. The other 2 large format changes have been a lot of positive benefits, but not as clear cut yet. 100%. There's no 2 ways about it. Hero limits was required. The second large change was open queue to role queue, which limited team compositions to 2 heroes from each role before role queue was not enforced in a 2-2-2 team composition. And players had the freedom to select any role they liked once they loaded the match. With open queue, teams had a lot of freedom of choice about what heroes and team compositions to play. But there were quite a few problems that role queue intended to address. Prior to implementing role queue, there was a stark imbalance in the number of people playing each role on each match. Damage was by far, and still is today, the most popular role, and tank was by far the least popular. In fact, seeing matches with 5 or 6 damage players was not uncommon. I'll just say this, roll queue sucks for top 500 and above, and it's great for everyone else. If you want to know something that was anti-pro and really good for the casual player, it's roll queue. I loved open queue because top 500 players, as long as you were consistent with your damage, you could fucking make anything work. You could make 5 DPS, 6 DPS work. You could do whatever you wanted. It could work because you were good enough. At the lower ranks, as soon as you weren't accurate with DPS and someone had a tank and your team just had 5 DPS and half of them sucked, you lost. Again, it was about a consistent experience across most of Overwatch that they were looking to have. The games I was having in top 500 were nowhere close to what you guys were seeing in your gold and metal ranks. It wasn't even close. The role imbalance frequently led to wild and balanced matches between teams. Game played better when heroes from all 3 roles were selected. This disparity caused social issues as players would try to pressure others into playing tank or support roles even if they didn't want to. What's funny is this still happens today, except they tell you what hero to pick within that role, so this issue is actually still prominent. It made balancing heroes more difficult since we couldn't balance around a certain role ratio for each team, and it made introducing new heroes more difficult since any new hero kit had to be taken into consideration of hundreds of different team compositions and ability that could overlap with it. This is true, but not true, right? This is like saying in Dota, when they make a hero, they have to go through every single ability from every single hero and be like, what does it do with this? What does it do with this? They don't do that. They're just like, we're making a mid laner, and they're going to be magic focused, and they're going to have no escape. They're going to have a lot of big damage, and that's it. No unique stuff, and they make it, and they don't care because you know what really stacks well with damage? More damage. People still don't understand that. People always talk about kit synergy. Junkrat synergy is great. If he had a third attack ability, damage ability instead of trap, that'd be great. Damage synergizes with damage, and you got another damage ability. You just kill everything. So don't underestimate just fucking mass amounts of damage. The move to a role queue format was to aim to mitigate these challenges. Moving to role queue solved many of these problems and added some additional benefits to the game as well. With role queue in place, matchmaking is based on skill within the given role, not just skill overall. It is so funny about this point that if you watch professional play and someone can play 3 heroes really well, the announcers are like, this is one of the greatest players in Overwatch history. He can play Genji, Tracer, and Cassidy at a super high level. Wow. Then you go into game and you're bitching at some fucking gold level player. Why can't you play 6 heroes well? What are you doing, dumbass? It's like, you can't do both. You can't expect pros. Well, you can expect pros to be really good at multiple heroes, but then expect the worst of the worst to do the same. It's always been a weird dichotomy in Overwatch. And this is at top 500 and pro levels as well. Like, talk to streamers and they'll be like, yeah, you should play a bunch of heroes well. And then you're like, but isn't it really impressive? And they'll be like, yeah. And you're like, well, why should I have to do that at gold? And they'll probably just say some bullshit. They're like, oh, we'll play to the best of your ability. And you're like, yeah, nice cop out, jackass. Some players have wildly different skill ratings per role because I hate some roles. And the ability to matchmake around set roles provides big, measurable boosts in match quality. Yeah, that was true. It also solidified the identity for each role and the fantasy of doing the role's job becoming clearer. I think this whole fantasy they talk about is a really bad downside to Overwatch, and they should just get rid of it. This idea of hero fantasy and role fantasy, like, fuck off. Make the game as good as possible. Done. Balance it for what you have to. If some heroes' fantasies are gone, who cares? What happened to Junkrat's fantasy? No one gave 2 fucks about that. How about Hanzo? Again, no 2 fucks about it. This applies to specific heroes that are favored and not all heroes, so it's a really pick and choose type thing. I think this fantasy stuff is bullshit. Also, this brings up. I had a short. It's not even like almost not even worth mentioning, but Avril was on SVB's stream once, and he was complaining about Mercy, and he's like, the idea of a support that only helps someone else and doesn't do anything themselves is bad and it shouldn't exist. And I'm like, isn't that really anti-diversity? Because you're saying Mercy players shouldn't be able to play the game that they want to play. And he's like, I didn't say that. We just have to change Mercy, but they can still play Mercy. And I'm like, that is the biggest fucking cop-out bullshit shenanigans I've ever heard of. You're like, yeah, they can play Mercy, but I'm changing what that means. Therefore, my argument's still correct. And it's just underhanded shit from Avril. It was I don't know, it was just fucking dumb. The truth is, diversity is more than just ethnicity or religion or race or gender or preference, all that stuff. It's also about like playstyle. That cat and mouse that Mercy has, it's so fucking fun. I get it. Like, there's competitive tag for adults. Why? Because fucking chasing people is hilarious, and running away from people is fun too. What is the first thing you do when you start playing with a dog? They run away from you, and you're like, oh shit, I gotta go get this dog, and the dog just runs away again. Like, it's just something everyone has fun with. And yes, it does allow people with lesser mechanical skill to play at a higher level than they should, because it's more about decision-making abilities. But what we're talking about now is the nature of supports, and that's how all supports are. And I know there are people like, oh, but some supports require mechanics. Yes, but their abilities are very strong. Their abilities are way stronger than any DPS. Same thing with tank. Even in Overwatch 1, tank abilities were immensely strong. They are more decision-making, right? Because the idea is tank and support, they're trying to pull in the MOBA and MMO players into a first-person shooter, and then the damage is there just to keep first-person shooters in. But once you get them in, you're like, I need these DPS players to go other places. So we need supports that are like DPS. We need tanks that are like DPS. We need tanks that are like supports. We need some supports that are like tanks, and we need DPS that can kind of do either of the two. And we got to have this diverse type of play style across every single role. That's what people don't fucking get, and it infuriates me. When anyone talks about diversity, they immediately go to race, religion, and all that other jazz. Like, whenever I talk about diversity in Overwatch, it is play style. Because all of our brains are wired differently. Some of us like some things, some of us don't like others. Just let people play the fucking game and stop trying to just, like, worry about skill floors. Just let people play the game and be happy. If you're good on some hero, don't go back, no, you can't be good as me. You're on a bad hero. Get out of my game. You're bad. You shouldn't be able to play this here. Like, fuck off. Just worry about yourself. If someone on a lesser skill hero is up here because the skill floor is a little bit higher, then just get better. In fact, wanting skill floors, not wanting skill floors to be high is actually, it's funny because people are like, oh, it's more skill expression, but it's actually like anti-skill. Because you're like, I need your hero to be worse so that I feel better about my skill level being above your hero, right? Like, if someone truly wanted skill to mean a lot, if some hero has a skill floor like this and they're just playing here and they're better than you, don't bitch. Get better. That's it. No one talks about this. There's no major streamer that has ever discussed this, and it fucking boggles my mind. While I'm on my soapbox, the SVV podcast last week, they finally talked about hero identity, and they're like, oh, hero identity is really big for Overwatch. Like, people really love the heroes, Mercy specifically, but they'll do anything. Like, is whatever Mercy is, they'll play it. They that's it. That's all they care about. And then it's like, yeah, that's a big. I said this about 7-8 years ago. Is that when you relate a hero like to an identity, and then these people that have an identity built around Mercy, and you tell them they can't play that hero, and you wonder why one tricks get upset, like they feel like a personal attack because they identify with someone, and then you said you can't be that. Like, that's why people get so pissed off when you tell them what to play. Mercy, big in the trans community, and it's kind of funny that these people are like, yeah, we're all about diversity. Oh, you can play Mercy up until Grandmaster, then you can't be that here. And it's like, they've heard that all their lives, and you wonder why they get real fucking pissed at people telling them how to, play the game, or in this case, because it's linked to their identity, how to live their lives. And I'm not saying, like, Overwatch did this on purpose. It's just a side effect of making such a damn fine game about identity and people loving their heroes and playing it constantly and really just wanting to be that. There are always cons to every pro, and this is just one of the cons that people get fucking pissed when you tell them how to play the game when they identify with a hero that they love. Yeah. Again, people don't. No big streamer again has ever talked about this. We'll continue now that I'm off my soapbox. However, the switch to roll queue system did have some downside, the largest, which was much longer queue times. People don't understand how bad queue times were. For me, it was 15 minutes a game. I beat other games on stream while queuing for Overwatch. If you want to think this is any other way, think of it from a marketing perspective. If you made something that was amazing, but no one could access it, did you actually make something amazing? You didn't. That was Overwatch. And what's even worse is imagine if someone went to look at your product and they just saw people playing other competitors. Right? Because every time, and it's not like a direct competitor, but like every time you looked up a big streamer, hey, I'm going to watch them play Overwatch. Oh, they're playing Minecraft for 15 minutes. Or in my case, hey, he's playing Might and Magic 7, something about medieval, but then he's fighting aliens? Like, what is this about? Why is everyone playing a different game? Oh, there's a game. Oh, they played it for 10 minutes. Oh, okay. Oh, well, they're playing another game for 15, 20 minutes again. What the fuck's going on? Like, you're marketing shit. No one can experience your game. It's just bad. Like, queue times were... It's the worst. It really is the worst. So queue times are massive. Prior to roll queue, the matchmaking just needed to find 12 players of similar skill levels, put them together. After roll queue, it needed to find 4 players in each role to make a match. The total number of players queuing had no effect on this. It's almost solely governed by the ratio of people queuing for the least popular role. Given the game's low relative ratio of players queuing for tank and other damage support roles, queue times went way up. We'll go to the details in this later. I will say this. Jeff Kaplan, family of Ding Dong, he had the ice cream argument. He's like, people don't like strawberry ice cream. And what did everyone say about this? They're like, oh, people don't like tank because there's not enough tanks. Or, oh, they don't like supports, there's not enough supports. We need more supports and that would fix all our issues. No, you dumbasses. If someone doesn't like strawberry ice cream, making more strawberry flavors doesn't fix shit. You just make more flavors I don't like. That's it. I'm not going to play support. You can have a billion support heroes. I'm still going to pick Junkrat. Yeah. So it really was how tank was designed. Also, I know this is for Final Fantasy XIV, but if you go to queue up for a dungeon and like it autofills, it's 2 supports, 2 DPS, 1 tank, because tank is unpopular, or is less popular, I should say. And that's just how all games work. Tank is less popular. It's just not people's shtick. It's not their thing. The team tried to address this and balance in various ways. We introduced Priority Pass. I played Hog for about 50 Priority Passes, and I just fucked around, and then I played DPS for 3 weeks. They gave players who played low demand roles tank a shorter queue when they switched to damage. This had a positive effect for several weeks, but its influence quickly faded. We also introduced systems to reward players for playing tank, eventually putting loot boxes and a bunch of XP. Again, this stuff means nothing. None of these were able to put a dent in the demand for playing DPS. Damage queue times drifted a bit lower over time, but this was much due to the introduction of open competitive queue and the permanent loss of damage players unwilling to wait that long for a match. Yep. If anyone wants to know why they kept open queue, that's it. It just sucked DPS players in. That was just like, I want to play now. Okay, cool. There are additional drawbacks with roll queue. As I mentioned earlier, many of our decisions have made improvements for the game at the cost of match variety and player freedom. Team compositions were now locked to 2-2-2. This is where Croats died. There's another step to a more consistent experience within Overwatch, but sometimes consistency can start to feel samey. That is true, but that's what you have. You have to get consistent across all roles. There's some pretty exciting metas in the pre-roll queue, and swapping to a hero of a different role mid-match often was a much bigger change and more exciting. That's true. And swapping to one of the same role. Like hero limits, role queue took away part of the freedom in selecting heroes that serve as the base of Overwatch, but I wonder if the success of it is cut and dry of that as hero limits. Could they bring an in-between version that softens the original problem without completely solving them? And also isn't quite as restrictive as our current role queue system. This is a really important point, and I mentioned this a long time ago. I was like, they should scale Ultimate Generation based on how many tanks are in the game. So if there's one tank, you got 50% ult when shooting them. There's 2 tanks, you got 100% ult. They ran 3 tanks, you got 150 or 200% ult when shooting. So all of a sudden, DPS, when you started running these really dense, and people be like, oh, but tanks have more hit points, and you're shooting them more, so you should get more ult, naturally. It wasn't quick enough. Like, if you run 3 tanks, you should be getting DPS ult twice a fight. Right? Like, it should be a major disadvantage. You should notice it immediately. Because then people will be like, oh shit, okay, maybe we should do 2-2-2. Maybe we can still make this tank stuff work. But yeah, so this, an in-between version, like maybe hey, for every tank that you pick, like you pick 1 tank, we get HP pools like in Overwatch 2. Pick 2 tanks, we get pools like in Overwatch 1. You pick 3 tanks, well, now the tanks are going to be like at 300 hit points. Right. But all of this stuff, if we're talking about an in-between dynamic version of balancing the game based on what you pick, you talk about barrier of entry. That's a big fucking one, guys. Like, this can get really complex, and there's going to be a lot of work on making it simple but effective. Yeah. Also, just remember, queue times increase by 20% no matter what. 'Cause you got to find 20% more people in 6v6 as compared to 5v5. Trying to fix this would be, interesting. The third major format change. So obviously they shift to 5v5. Why did we do it? Queue times after switching to 5v5, what the team thinks about 6v6. Here we go. Why did we switch to 5v5? We talked about greater individual agency that players could have in 5v5. Overwatch is a team sport. I have to make this distinction. There's difference between team work and team dependency. Overwatch 2 was team dependent, and at the start of Overwatch 1 was team dependent. At the start of Overwatch 2 was team dependent as well. Dependency is bad. It's 10 people or 12 people trying to work together. You cannot be fully dependent on a team, someone else. You have to be able to do the game yourself, to a point. So teamwork, I'm good with. Team dependency is bad. Tank synergy in Overwatch 1 was like team dependency. They had that dependency. If we didn't do it, we lost. And it requires players to rely on each other to be successful. This is even more the case previously. The game could be frustrating if your team was out of sync. Many times, fights in 6v6 couldn't be resolved until ultimate abilities came online. Correct that. Until ultimate combos could be executed to break through 2 tanks worth of damage mitigation by high uncontested healing output. The world of 6v6 could have really high highs but really low lows. One of the design goals of 5v5 was to raise that floor, even though it was at the expense of some of those high moments. This high highs and really low lows, the best way I can describe this to other people would be the fighting game community and double elimination tournaments. A lot of double elimination tournaments, usually when you get to the grand finals, usually the winner side will have some advantage. Maybe it's a game up, maybe it's first pick, first ban. Maybe they have some advantages. But in the fighting game scene, you actually have to, the loser has to beat the winner 2 times in a row. Like full on best of 5, they have to win 2 best of 5s. And it makes it sometimes extremely unexciting. Because you're like, this guy has a mountain to climb up. And that guy's from the winner side. He's probably going to win really easily. Sometimes you just get these upsets. You go in there and they just get 0-3'd. And you're like, alright, that was cool. But sometimes the loser wins. And it's a reset. and then they fight a second time, and that goes to like the max rounds, and that's super exciting. Street Fighter 6 did this Evo last weekend. When that happens, it is the highest of highs. It is beautiful. And I think in those cases, it's worth the lowest of lows. It's just a really good story. Like, it's just really good. It really is preference at that point. Because some people, like Worm is saying in chat, he likes the high stakes of single limb. That's cool. Double limb is really neat. I think it's really good. Get to the grand finals, it gets iffy, but man, like, I went to Evo 3 times in my life. And some of those matches did go bracket reset, and it was pretty exciting. Overwatch 2, and so basically all I'm saying is, like, this is preference. Liking really high highs but really low lows, or making it, more like a sine wave or something. Like, yeah. Overwatch 2 has greater emphasis on FPS gameplay. To me, that's a bonus. There's less damage mitigation and CC. Bonus. And players get to shoot at enemies more. Bonus. Crowd control could take players out of the game for extended periods of time, especially when they were chained back to back, like a 5-second hack, into a freeze, into a brig bash, into on a sleep, Orisa halt, yada yada yada. Typically, a tank would decide this on assault, at least in game. The real life mental health was another story. 100%. Damage heroes often complained that their role was the least impactful relative to the strength of super-powered tank synergies and support heroes undoing their playmaking. The emphasis on ability cooldown management, ult tracking, shooting barriers instead of players, and not big enough time windows, just shoot enemies and get eliminations were all a factor that contributed to this feeling. It's amazing because for years I harped on this. I said supports needed bigger windows. I was like, tanks need more or less less synergy, but tanks needed to be weaker so they couldn't fight on the flank. This right here is the biggest difference between 5v5 and 6v6. In 5v5, DPS can flank. They have agency. They can do what they want. They can maps, they can do it. It's great. In 6v6, tanks can do what they want. DPS cannot flank, right? Because if you flank, off-tank jumps on you, you die. Off-tank beats DPS. No questions asked. You would have to have a really, really big skill imbalance or something else hidden up your sleeve to undo that. Yeah. People don't talk about that flank at all either. I wish I could just talk to someone that was more popular and we could actually get these ideas out there. Support heroes also had to focus almost exclusively on healing since there were bigger team health pools, right, because there's 2 tanks, and more incoming damage on the field with the additional tank player. People seem to forget this. When Overwatch 2 came out, the first thing Blizzard said was, removing 1 tank removes significantly more damage from the game than it did damage mitigation, because tanks do a lot of damage. In 5v5, they had more agency and could add some damage to duel other heroes. Yep. Tank synergy wasn't always fun. It slowed the game down and stabilized it, but it sometimes absolutely grounded it to a halt. Fucking A. 2 CP. 2 CP. People point to double shield meta as an example of this. It wasn't just double shields, though. The ability to stack a very defensive-heavy lineup, especially in game modes that required a team to push through a small choke, caused a lot of matches to feel like there was no progress at all. Just 1,000,000,000%. Any shield hero with D.Va. Oh, your shield's almost broke? Okay, I'll damage mitigate for a couple seconds. I'll take then another couple seconds worth of damage because I have a high hit point pool. You're Reinhardt, you got 1,400 more hit points on that shield. Sweet, start blocking again, buddy. Oh, you're down to 500 hit points. All my stuff's back up. I'm fully healed. I'll start damage mitigating again. Like, tanks being able to change cooldowns. I know people are like, oh, but it was skillful. It was a beautiful dance. Guys, it was fucking easy. Let's be completely honest. Tank using abilities, I understand it takes a little bit to getting used to, but once you get it, it's like you press a fucking button. It's done. Yeah. The DPS would have to outplay tank tremendously. You would need like 3 to 4 times the amount of skill that tank would need just to get past the choke. The game is faster now, and it doesn't typically stall out. I'm good with that. Feels like there's more room to move around with the map without the need to earn every inch of it. Also good. In 5v5, Fights are often less focused on moving around in a death ball formation. There's more room to take angles, flank, and duel other players, which brings us into more FPS gameplay. 100%. Love this. Again, it's all about flanking, duels. This is wonderful. While in 66 can have high moments, it's hard to follow. Tracking 9 other players is easier than 11. Fewer visual effects. Yes. Overwatch is notoriously high visual clutter. It was worth with more heroes. Especially during big team fights, Overwatch is a pretty demanding game, and moving 5v5 made it a bit more cognitively manageable. Lastly, one of the biggest benefits was dramatically reduced queue times. Let's explore that. Here's a graph. Introduction of row queue, yada, 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 yada. Okay. I was twice this. My average competitive queue time was probably 10 to 15 minutes. Right here it says 7.6. In Overwatch 2, it dropped to 2.9. Also, it dropped here as well for support and tank. Now, some people will contribute this to free-to-play. I'm going to contribute this to fucking needing one tank. The biggest factor driving between Overwatch and Overwatch 2 queue times is the ratio of players queuing for each role. We hear players speculate that long queue times are a result of not enough players playing in Overwatch. That isn't the case, but instead they're relative to other roles, right? That's the big thing. Again, it's not about popularity, it's about how many people are queuing up for each role with respect to each other. Players generally queue tank less, leading to longer wait times for everyone, as we wait for tank to free up for a proper match. So in practical, the actual ratio of players queuing for tank, support, and damage is much closer to the current 1-2-2 format than the previous 2-2-2 format. As a result, the 5v5 role queue format better mirrors the actual player interest in each role, making the switch to resulted in shorter queues. I tweeted this today. It is like, this is what I fully expect to happen to Overwatch. If Blizzard goes, we're bringing 6v6 back. People are going to play it for a week and then never play it again. And it's going to be like when they re-released Morbius. And the production company or the movie theaters, they brought it back. And no one saw it. And it was just a waste of fucking money. Blizzard will get stood up if we go back to 6v6. Guarantee it. Because I don't think we're going to double our tank count. Right? I don't think twice as many people are going to play tank to fill the need of having the need for twice as many tanks. It's Morbid time. Yep. It's 6v6 time. The sharp drop off in queue times in October 2022, along with 5v5 shipped, the queue times of all heroes dropped and are much shorter than they were in the 6v6 role. This is almost all because the game required one less tank in a match. If you look at the current queue times, you can see that there's still lack of tanks compared to other roles. Just flipping the switch and returning to 6v6 would cause this previous queue time or worse. Regardless of the amount of players in-game, queue times are always reflective on how many people are queued per role. In other words, the main driving increase in queue times is the ratio of players queued in each role. Since there are less tanks, it'll go back to where it was before. Thoughts on 6v6? Game started with 6 players on each team. I discussed why we moved away from it. But that doesn't mean it's without merit. There are moments in madness that could happen with 12 players in a match that just don't quite coalesce when there are 10. There's almost too much to keep track of. Correction. It was too much to keep track of at times. But it was part of the charm. There are big moments in Overwatch 2, but they don't have quite the same chaotic, over-the-top feeling to them. This is probably what Marvel players are feeling right now. Part of the chaos allowed players to feel less pressure in a match. There was an extra player to take up a bit of the slack for someone that was performing poorly. And since that player was a tank, they had quite a bit of impact. There's a lot more hit points and defensive capabilities to burn through, which had a stabilizing effect on the gameplay. Teams would fold a bit slower than they do now. We went over some of the issues of tank synergies earlier, but having 2 of them allowed one to focus protecting the backlines while the other held ground or pushed into the enemy team. The tank role had a lot of depth and understanding how to work with the other tank on the team. This part of the mastery curve took a long time to learn, and for the small group of people devoted to it, that was part of its allure. I need to stress, for the small group of people devoted to it, going to one tank may have lost this small group, but hey, we lost 2% of our tank players and we gained probably 60%. Or we needed 50% less, and we gained some more because there's a lot of people that like just the overpowered tank role. So making it simpler is not a bad thing. Just some people didn't like it. Cool. We mentioned the difficulty in balancing tanks for 6v6 earlier, but the past year and a half has shown us there are issues with balancing tanks for 5v5 as well. I will say 5v5 is solvable, 6v6 is not. I think I have a blog post on it. Basically, tanks are a house of cards. You have to have hit points. You have to have damage mitigation. Damage mitigation must work against an entire team worth of damage. At the same time, how do you balance that when it's against one person? Right? You can't make a tank that just... I mean, you could. You could make shield health be based on how many tanks are in the game, maybe, or how many people are shooting the shield. You'd have to gamify it. It would be complex. But the idea is how can I make it so a tank doesn't just dominate one person, but has enough damage mitigation against an entire team? And then what happens if I put two of these tanks together, and I have two tanks, and I can absorb 12 amount of people attacking me if I have two shields? That's the difficult part. Oh, also, they can't have stuns, because as an FPS, we want control. And two, they have to have damage, because they need to be some type of threat. They have DPS, damage mitigation against a team, against a solo. They have some self-sufficiency. They have hit points. They got everything. 66 tanks were fucking broken. If you had 66 tanks in any other game, in a MOBA and an MMO, you would never play DPS. That's why we had GOATs. Just because they have everything. There's no reason to play anything else. 66 tanks were fucking nuts. They all... Tank beat DPS in every situation. Except for, like, being this far away from them. But if you had a tank with mobility, then they won. For much of Overwatch 2, tanks have been fairly balanced, but with one of them becoming a powerful outlier, like Margwa, that can be felt strongly in the world of one tank. That's a lot of setup. I think I put more effort in this essay than I wrote in college. Probably shit at college. Probably wasn't very good. So where do we go from here? At the end of the day, we want to make this game that players want to play. So this is the problem. The 6v6 crowd could just be very loud, and there's not a lot of them. It's scary to do this. That's why they're going to... Well, we'll continue. Because this challenge is mentioned previously, we are focused on making 5v5 the best experience that it can be, but not quickly. They have to stretch out content because they got to sell battle passes, and they can't just make the game as good as possible right now. That's not modern game design. However, because we operate as a service to our players, we also need to remain open-minded to reevaluate our decisions based on your actions and feedback to give you the best gameplay experience we can. Rather than introduce a disruptive, permanent change to the game, we prefer to explore the space and make changes based on that exploration. With that said, we are looking at running a series of events to try out different core team composition formats in Overwatch 2. The community has, just once or twice, suggested a test. Why not put various forms of 66 in the game in order to gauge the results? We agree. Based on your feedback, we're exploring how we can test different forms of 66 in the game to gauge the results. This is taking some time, however, for the reasons that may not be readily apparent. Again, they're going to get morbed. They're going to get morbid on. If they'd run some quick play hacked of 6v6, I expect it to be popular for like 2 days. If they do it for a week, people won't come back. They'll play for it for like 3 days and then they're done. Yeah. The first and honestly largest reason that we need to do this in this way is that it allowed the game to have optimized technical performance. I didn't realize this, but apparently Overwatch 2 is much more demanding than Overwatch 1. I'm referring to frame rate and memory constraints with 12 players in a match. There are quite a few upgrades and additions to Overwatch 2 that have impacted the performance of the game. These range from new features like allied outlines to enable healer vision by default, the addition of more technically demanding hero kits, as well as visual upgrades to UI, heroes, and maps. I'm just going to say this. I wonder if they made it so you couldn't swap. I'm not talking about, like, let's not talk about balance. But if you made it so you couldn't swap, if you could unload all the assets and all the hero kits, it would overall increase performance, even if they weren't in the game. I wonder if there's something that's there, because you could swap the diva anytime you want, and then those assets have to be ready. But if you loaded up a game where people picked heroes beforehand, then they just wouldn't be in the game. In a 66 setting, these upgrades can have significant impact on our players, causing them to underperform in older systems. Overwatch is a fast-paced game. Maintaining a game that runs smoothly across all platforms is important. I hope they don't mean to Switch for the player experience. While limited time tests could arrive sooner, the team is still investigating exactly how long it would take to permanently increase performance across the game. This would be a large effort that would most likely take several seasons to accomplish. Another issue that gives us anxiety about opening this Pandora's box is what to do with queue times if enough players prefer 66 to keep some of the form of it around. So this is like CS 1.6 and, CSGO or whatever. You're splitting your user base. And we're splitting it 3 times. We have 6v6, we have open queue, we have roll queue. Well, we have some ideas now. There's no guarantee that they will work. Is there a world where people are willing to live with that long queue time to play this format? Maybe. But that's a pretty risky move to make. We also have tens of millions of new players that have only played 5v5. We want to be openly mindful to not frustrate those who like the game as it is today. The outcome of these tests would give us a lot of valuable information to consider moving forward. We'd run a test for a few weeks to gauge interest in the community, then we'd measure the impact it had on other experiences at Overwatch 2, like 5v5 Arcade, etc. All I can think of is that all these big streamers that are talking about 6v6, if 6v6 came out, they'd probably they'd stream Overwatch for like a day or two, and then they'd just fucking go to Marvel or play some other game. We take lessons from this playtest to see what we can learn about the media within the current game ecosystem and for the future of Overwatch. We would reflect carefully on the learnings from whatever tests we run and explore how to best give players that what's being asked for, whether it's a world of 5v5 or 66 or both. Maybe it's a 5v6. Oh, wouldn't that fucking suck? Is for the future to figure out. I'm going to jump on my soapbox for a moment and look at the changes to Overwatch since its inception. It's clear that many have reduced some of the variety within an Overwatch match. We get feedback from some players that Overwatch can feel the same from game to game. The reason why Overwatch actually really feels the same from game to game is because Overwatch has been found to have answers, be it based on map, be it based on meta of what's strong. The way to make it not feel samey is to make all heroes viable. Truly. If you played games against Torb or Junk or Sim or Mei more often, it wouldn't feel the same. Like these heroes that play drastically different and are non-meta because they play very specifically, those are the heroes that actually change how the game feels. Right? If you have 10 hit scan heroes, they're all going to play the fucking same. You sit behind the hero, you sit behind the tank, you sit there with no risk, point and click adventure. That's it. It's going to be the same. Doesn't matter if you're against a Widow or an Ashe or a Soldier or a Cassidy. Sojourn, all these heroes fucking, it's the same shit every time. Make these heroes weaker, maybe add crazy map changes, maybe do things, be like, hey, tanks now take 50% less damage from hit scan in all cases. Make people swap. If swapping is part of the game, then let's fucking make them do that. Because for everyone that says Overwatch, core Overwatch is swapping. That is core to Overwatch. That's a lie. It's not true. I'm proof. Right? I've played Junkrat for 8 years. More or less, when Overwatch 1, I've made top 500, top 100 almost every season. It's not core. Core to being a human being is breathing. If you stop breathing, you die. I have never swapped, and I've been able to play the game better than everyone else. Not everyone else, but like 99, right? I'm the 0.1%. So clearly it's not core. Or at least not as core as you think it is. While much of this gets attributed to 5v5, we feel that there is more at play here. Besides running experiments with 66, we'd like to run some that re-examine the ways we tried solving problems previously. Specifically with the goal of bringing some of the freedom back to Overwatch match with the severity of issues that accompanied it. For instance, we think there could be better ways of putting the team together that aren't quite as rigid as a set composition, but not as loose as open queue. We'll be running one quick play hack based on this idea in Season 13. We're in Season 11? So what, like 4 or 5 months out? There are some gotchas to this direction, but after reading 400 pages of this blog, I hope you're all able to see that there are trade-offs for the decision to go into the game. So this is interesting. We talked about this before. How can we have a loose set, right? It would almost have to be dynamic. Or, I suggested this a long time ago, just make tanks into DPS. And you'd queue 4-2, right? Yeah. But what really, really kind of drives this, it all comes to tanks, right? Because Overwatch, if we look at supports and we look at DPS, the intra balance between the two, like, they're really good. Supports compared to other sports are really good. Like, it's very close balance wise. Same thing with DPS. Like, even Junkrat and Torb, like, it's close, right? They're actually close to Soldier and Cassidy. They really, as far as we're concerned, like, it's 90% of the way there. And how DPS and support interact is actually really good. It seems fairly balanced. It's very balanced. It's tanks that really fuck things up. And now you're like, well, do we not need tanks? There's two examples of what happens when you don't have tanks. We saw it with Concord. We saw it right now with Marvel Rivals. When you don't have a tank, this entire idea of Overwatch, here's Team A, here's Team B, and that's Overwatch. This is what really makes Overwatch Overwatch. That. You need tanks to make this Civil War-esque fight happen. You play Marvel Rivals, you play Concord, you play any game with a bunch of different roles, but tanks not required, you can get away without running a tank, but it feels like a crazy deathmatch. It feels like when I was a child and I was playing games in the late 90s, I was playing Unreal Tournament, I was playing Quake, I was playing Tribes. It feels like a crazy-ass deathmatch. And it doesn't really feel like A and B that we get with Overwatch. That structure is Overwatch. So I think if you made tanks in the DPS, I don't think the game would feel the same still. I think that would actually greatly alter what it means to be Overwatch. I'd be interested to see it, but that rigidity of two teams attacking head on each other is what the game is about. The craziness they talked about with open queue, it still was like this. Even with roll queue, it was kind of like this. Or before roll queue, it was like this. When we ran 6 DPS, I'll tell you right now, it wasn't that. It was different. Now, they probably had a tank, but it didn't feel like that at all. You could look at my Croats game, right? It was me on Junkrat and 5 supports. It doesn't go like this, right? It's like one is, and this is what's really cool, is like one's like this amorphous blob that, you know, Junkrat and 5 supports, and we're just like, how do we deal with this 2-2-2? Because the 2-2-2 is just coming straight down and beating your ass. It's like, all right, we have to do this. We have to do some really interesting plays, which is really cool and fun, but it's not Overwatch. Watch Shanghai Dragons triple DPS versus Goats. Yes, it greatly changes how the game is. So, as much as tanks fuck this game up, and as hard of a decision as it is on what to do with tanks, I think they're required. And the funny thing is Lemon Kiwi, they did a patch where she was allowed to make some changes to tanks, and she made them all like MOBA tanks. Not MOBA tanks, sorry. Yeah, like MOBA tanks, sorry. Where they had less damage, and people just ignored them. You just walked right past them. Like, it didn't feel like Overwatch either, because there was no this, because the lines were just, you just melded and you just ignored the tank. Yeah. I think tanks are required. It was also supremely boring. Yeah, it was horribly boring. But I was just saying, like, when tanks can't cause a threat and they can't put pressure and they can't make this line, when you don't have a line against the line, it doesn't feel like Overwatch. It feels like deathmatch, which can be fun, but it's not Overwatch. There's some gotchas in this direction, but yeah, to wrap it up for now, your feedback has driven both our inspiration and commitment to testing new ideas in game. We want to be super thoughtful about how we implement new ideas into the live game because there are millions of players who are waiting to jump into Overwatch each season, and we want anything we put in game to benefit the community as a whole. So 66ers, what they're saying is you may be a minority, and if you don't actually start backing your shit up with actually playing these games that they put out, you're fucking done. Ultimately, the Overwatch team wants to continue building the game that wants to play season after season. This blog, or thesis rather, is the start of the conversation. This isn't the last time we're going to be getting into 5v5 or 66, and we can't wait to share more about our plans in the future. In closing, we appreciate you so much. We love seeing your passion and dedication to this game, Team 4, and the Overwatch community. The team hears you, we see you, and we're incredibly thankful to be on this ride with all of you. Can't wait to share more of the upcoming months. Let's make this game great together. Fix Junkrat and all the off metas, you piece of garbage. Yeah, let's see if the team hears me. They'll be like, oh no. Actually, 100% the Overwatch team doesn't listen to me because Alex Dawson said, yeah, if you're a jerk, we're not going to listen to you no matter what you say. That's me. So, I'll just be in my little corner over here being right, and no one's going to listen except for you guys. That's cool. We'll have our little right party, and we'll be happy with it. What's hilarious is I'm not saying they don't listen to me, but I will say this. I wouldn't be surprised if someone on the dev team listens to me or they watch my videos and then they use it. Because when Aaron Keller earlier this year said, oh, Overwatch is really simple and we may need more systems to balance around because we don't have enough balancing points. That was what I said in my video a couple of years ago. Right? And a lot of the stuff that gets talked about here, I've talked about years ago. They hate me because I speak the truth. I do. Yes. I have spoken of this before. And now, like, the funny thing is like, I got my own life, guys. So, like, I'll be here. I'll still be playing Junkrat. And, if I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Funny thing is, tomorrow I'll still play Junkrat. Nothing's going to change. I'll still be here. I don't really have any pride in any of this stuff. Like, if I'm wrong, it's like, all right, cool. That's dope. So it's great. It's just like, it's only bonuses for me. Hero diversity and viability is the fix to the game. Yeah. Truth. Any game that gets solved is done. Any game that gets solved loses all value. We see that with tic-tac-toe. Right? No one plays tic-tac-toe because as a kid, like, you would actually play it. As I was a kid. Sorry, I'm old. In the 90s, you'd play tic-tac-toe because no one put enough thought into always draw the game. But once you know how to play, you always draw. And so no one plays anymore. The game's just done. Competitive tic-tac-toe tournaments win. I think you just always draw. If two people know what they're doing, it just never you can't win. That's why the game's useless. So if Overwatch ever gets to a state where if I play a map and we have to play this composition because that's what you do on this map, that's the best composition, and we have an answer and they have an answer, there's no point in playing it. There's real no point in playing it. I know people be like, well, it's about who can do that answer better. And it's like, no, I want my answer, right? I don't want to solve it your way. I want to solve it my way. That's what makes it a game. Right? And if I'm okay with losing my way rather than winning my way, that's fine. That's how I play the game. And you can't tell me to play the game any way differently. People hate that. They're not fans of that. Because they're like, oh, you're ruining 6 other people or 12 other people's enjoyment. I was like, well, shit happens. We all play the same game. It's what happens when you have team dependency and not teamwork. So, okay. So I got work in the morning, boys and girls and whatever else is out there. So I gotta get to bed. I'm old. I'm old. I got fucking glasses. Look at the gray. I got so much gray in my beard now. I got no hair. Dye it? No. It used to be red. Oh, sorry. This used to be a black stripe down the center of my goat or my beard. I got red and black. So you just shave your beard? Oh man. As Magitech puts it, if I shave fully, I have potato face. It's rough. Junkrat aged you? No, I don't think it did. I think I aged me. In fact, if you watch my first videos, I'm the same person. Nothing has changed in the 8 years I've played Junkrat. Like, it's just... It's just the same. It's just bitterness. It's just the same shit over and over. Which I'm fine with. That's cool. I like getting good at things, which is hilarious. Because for people that say I'm anti-skill, I'm actually about hero mastery, right? I'm about perfecting something. It's so weird. Like, one tricking being looked down upon is so weird. I will never understand it. Look at fighting game people. One hero. Get the best at it. Be a specialist. You get surgery, you go to a specialist. You don't go to some fucking general guy. You want the best of the best. It's, right? Quarterbacks in football. Why don't they run the ball? Like, why don't they on the line as well? Why don't they do everything? Well, it's because they're a specialist, you dumbass. As human beings, we're basically specialists. You're a specialist in your job. I'm a specialist in my job. It's the way the world works. And then when we come to Overwatch, we scream, don't get good. Don't master a hero. Just, when the going gets tough, quit. Pick a different hero. Don't ever get good. Don't get good at your weak matchups. Fucking dumbass advice from the general community, I'll say that. That's enough of my bitching and complaining.